Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In chapters 24 and 25 of his work on friendship, Marcus Tullius Cicero broaches a topic that some of us might not want to think about, but he thinks is absolutely important if we're going to understand friendship properly, and that is criticizing our friends. And also, we should think about this as applying to ourselves, not just as the critiquer, the person who's giving the criticism, but how we should understand and approach our friends criticizing us, because we do have a tendency, like everybody else, to take offense at being criticized, especially by those who we think ought to be supporting us, backing us, saying good things about us. This is a common human dynamic. And unless somebody is absolutely perfect, and even Scipio himself, the great friend of Laelius, who he says is superior to him, is not a perfect human being and would expect to have some admonition, criticism, however we want to talk about it. In this case, the translation is often rebuking, which is another nice term. Unless we're perfect people, we're going to screw up. And we often do need our friends to be quite frank with us, very forthcoming, and say, man, you're messing this up. You have to take care of this thing over here. You're kind of a jerk. Maybe you should fix this personality trait that you've got going on over here. That's something that if we were correctly aligned, if we were thinking straight, we would recognize as a good thing, not as simply an attack on us. So Cicero begins talking about this in 24, and he says that varied and complex are the experiences of friendship. They offer many causes for suspicion and offense, which is wise sometimes to ignore, sometimes to make light of, and sometimes to endure. But, he says, there's one cause of offense in friendship which must be encountered in order that both the usefulness and loyalty of friendship may be preserved. For friends, frequently, he doesn't just say every once in a while, frequently must not only be advised, and the word here for advised, monendi, is also warned. Friends don't need to just have the positive things set out to them. Oh, this is going to be a great thing that you can plan to do. They also need some warning, but they also have to be, as he's saying, rebuked or criticized. We have to say negative things to our friends about their own actions, choices, motivations, character at some points, and this is going to be very important. So he says that both advice and rebuke have to be taken in a certain way. If we don't do this, we're actually letting our friends down, and that's not a good thing. So let's talk about some of the things that he's saying here before we jump into the how to do it. He says that this preserves usefulness, utilitas, and loyalty or fidelity, fides, within the friendship. So there's two different things going on here. It is useful for us to hear criticism of ourselves when that criticism is on point, because it allows us to avoid screwing things up worse. And it helps us to perhaps either recognize that there's a problem that needs to be attended to, or to have the resolve of finally dealing with it. When our friends say, man, you're kind of a jerk when you do this or that. You know, you get stressed out, or you drink, or you encounter some sort of setback. You turn into a complete jerk. maybe we already know that, but we need our friends to say, man, you're screwing up, in order for us to take it seriously. It's also part of loyalty. And this is where a lot of people get mixed up. They think that if a friend is loyal, they're not going to point out your flaws. They're going to have your back all the time. They'll never criticize you. Cicero is saying that's a mistaken view of friendship. Loyalty oftentimes means doing the difficult work of calling people out on the things that they're doing that aren't right. Now, he also says that it should be received in a friendly way, amiche, right? So that's important. Taking criticism is often a difficult thing for people to do. But he says that it should be received in a friendly way when goodwill is demonstrably there. And benevolentia, or goodwill, is something that is absolutely central to friendship. It's one of its main features. Now, here he doesn't actually say benevolentia, it's benevola. It's an adverb, but it's the same word, essentially. So, with goodwill. Now, Cicero is going to stress over and over again, he's going to use this word truth, veritas, right? As being absolutely necessary for friendship. It gets translated sometimes as sincerity or in other ways, but it's always truth that he's talking about here. Truth is needed for friendship, and he says, what a troublesome thing truth is if it is indeed the source of hate which poisons friendship. And then he says, but much more poisonous and troublesome is something that we're translating here as complacence in the particular translation I'm looking at here. In the Latin, it's obsequio. And we get this nice English word from that, obsequious, right? Obsequiousness is the characteristic. When somebody is obsequious, they are, sort of going along to get along. Many of you have probably heard that expression. They're people pleasers is another way of putting it in our contemporary parlance. These are the people who won't tell you the truth about things. These are the people who will cover up your own screw-ups and won't tell you to your face that you've been making mistakes. And then the mistakes will appear and you'll be, justifiably upset. A lot of people actually want people to behave that way. Cicero says that this is actually a terrible idea. Why? Because it shows indulgence to the screw-ups, the sins, the flaws of a friend, and allows them to be carried away. So it's important to confront people. That's another term that we use too, to confront our friends. And Cicero says we have to be careful in doing this. We need to approach criticizing friends in the right way. One thing he says is that we need to use reason and care or diligence. The term there is actually diligentia, right? So we need to think through how we're going to criticize people. We shouldn't just fire things off the cuff. We should approach things in a careful, well-planned out, prudent way. And that also means we should point out from a Ciceronian point of view that there's going to be kind of a due measure to it. You don't just blast your friend in all sorts of ways about everything that they're doing wrong. You deal with things in proportion. You don't blow them, as we say, out of proportion and treat, not wearing the right shoes or something to an event as if it's like poisoning the punch bowl or anything along those sorts of lines, right? So he also tells us we need to be careful in our tone. And this would also, I imagine, extend to word choice. He tells us to avoid harshness, acerbitas in Latin. It's a word that we get. It's a taste word, meaning the things that are kind of tough on our tongue. So imagine like taking a spoonful of mustard or it could be also something like sriracha sauce and just ladling it on your tongue. That's acerbitas, right? You don't want to do that sort of thing. Or drinking vinegar, right? That's not good. Don't do that with your words. Don't say things in a mean way to your friend. You can tell them that they're screwing up without rubbing their nose in it. And avoid going even further and engaging in insult, in Latin, contumelia, right? We get a word from that nobody uses these days, which is sort of a cognate. But insult is probably good enough. Don't say things to your friends when you're criticizing them that are going over the top. You don't have to stress to them just how much they've screwed up. It's enough to show them that there's a mistake there, and you'll more easily get them to take it seriously. Cicero says we also have to avoid the other extreme, and he gives a lot of discussions and synonyms for this. We have to avoid flattery, and he says that we have a number of different words for this that get translated. He says there's nothing to be considered a greater bane of friendship than fawning, cajolery, or flattery. For give it as many names as you choose, it deserves to be branded as a vice peculiar to fickle and false-hearted men who say everything with a view to pleasure and nothing with a view to truth. Right? Isn't that an interesting phrase there? Why do people engage in flattery? They don't have guts. They can't actually stand the truth, and so they give other people things that are going to sound good. Again, we can talk in terms of being a people pleaser or going along to get along, right? Putting the best face on it. Well, if it's a false face, it's not the best face. We need to be honest with each other. He also talks about what's translated here as hypocrisy. Being fake, being phony works just fine for this term simulatio. We get the word simulation from this. When you're being a hypocrite, literally, you're being an actor, the people who would put the masks on the stage. And there's all different ways in which we simulate or dissimulate things that we don't actually think or feel. So somebody comes along and says, hey, give me my performance review. We want to be honest in saying, well, you're doing great in these areas, but man, you need to work on your delivery. Or you probably should start organizing your calendar because you keep missing appointments, and that's not good for clients. Being fake is the opposite of that. Now, the thing that is problematic here that Cicero talks about is a common human dynamic. And this is a fault that I know I myself sometimes suffer from, and many people listening to this probably suffer from as well. And it was a similar issue in Cicero's time. This is probably part of human nature, and many people talk about this. Cicero focuses on people who are upset with being criticized and are not upset over the fault that's being criticized. Instead, they get upset with the fact that fault is being pointed out. And you could say, well, really they are upset about the fault deep inside of them, and that's why they're so sensitive about it. But Cicero thinks that there is a kind of blindness going on here. And he actually talks about a person like this having a soul that's or a personality that in some way is not a unity, it's not integrated. It's at war with itself. He says that this is going to stand in the way of friendship. Since the effect of friendship is to make, as it were, one soul out of many, how will that be possible if not even in one man taken by himself there will be a soul always one and the same, but fickle, changeable, and manifold, multiplex, right? So, insofar as we're able to take criticism, we're able to become better people, and we're able to become better friends. And this is one of those things that is, unfortunately, an integral part of genuine friendship. Being able to give criticism and take criticism in the right ways, that's going to cement the bonds of a friendship over time. Not being able to do so is going to produce a lack of friendship. And people are really badly off, he says, when they are, in this case, he brings up a saying of Cato, some men are better served by their bitter-tongued enemies than by their sweet-smiling friends, because the former often tell the truth, the latter never. We don't want to be in that case. We want to be able to accept criticism and understand. We might want to project this notion of goodwill being there. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that real friends are not criticizing us just to be jerks themselves or to put us down or to have power over us, or any of these other things to humiliate and embarrass us for whatever kicks they get out of that. They're doing it because it's good for us. And so we can adopt that perspective for ourselves, and we can try to promote that perspective for our friends.